Well, hi, Dan. Summers are typically slow around municipal politics and politics in general, but busy a couple of weeks in Vancouver, and Vancouver very quickly has a new city manager.
Yes, yeah. So just this morning, it was confirmed that, barely a week after we learned that the previous city manager was departing the top job in Vancouver's public administration, we've got a new city manager. So Donnie Van Dyke, who was the city manager for the city of Delta for the last couple of years, is going to be Vancouver's next city manager.
So, what do we know about Van Dyke?
Well, he's fairly young. He's only 41 years old, and he has fairly quick rise, through the world of municipal government. He was the city manager of Penticton for a few years, and before going to Delta, my understanding is that, the mayor and council of Delta sort of identified Van Dyke as a kind of a rising star after his 4 years in Penticton, and actively kind of tried to recruit him. And they were very impressed with his work. I just earlier this morning spoke with the mayor of Delta, George Harvey, who had nothing but good things to say about Van Dyke. And Harvey has kind of a unique perspective because he was actually the city manager before he got into politics. It was then called the CAO, but same role. And Delta councillor Dylan Kruger also, said that he wasn't surprised that a bigger city has now kind of recruited Van Dyke away. He described Van Dyke as, a real, yeah, again, a kind of a rising star. Kruger said, he's disappointed. It's going to be hard to find someone to replace him. He said Delta's loss is Vancouver's gain. And it was interesting. Kruger described Van Dyke as kind of a no-nonsense, get things done type of manager, not afraid to tell people if their ideas were bad, not afraid to maybe hurt some feelings, but able to do it in such a way that he was still really well liked by staff, which would include people who have been at the organization for a long time, people who are decades older than him, which isn't necessarily an easy position to be managing people like in that. He took the job when he was still in his 30s. And according to the mayor and this councillor who I spoke with, they said he seemed to be quite well respected by staff and was able to both get along with them, but still manage them and try to produce tangible results.
We don't know for sure, but all signs point to the fact that Ken Sim was already courting this guy before he, let go, had a mutual parting of the ways, is the way they like to describe it, with the previous city manager, Paul Mockery. But do you know at this point, I know it's still early for you in reporting on this, the relationship, or is there any relationship between Ken Sim and this young city manager?
I don't know how they met or when they met or how Van Dyke may have come to Sim or the mayor's office's attention. I don't really know anything about that, but I mean the timeline certainly would suggest that I guess when Mokry's departure was announced, it would seem like Sim and the people in his kind of orbit presumably already had Van Dyke in mind as the successor. I mean, I note that last time Vancouver changed city managers, when Sadhu Johnston announced his departure, he announced that he was going to resign and within a few months. And then after that, his deputy, Paul Mokry, sort of served as an acting interim city manager for a number of months while a big international executive recruitment and search process unfolded over several months. So there were 8 months that passed between Sadhu Johnston announcing his retirement and Paul Mokry being confirmed as the new city manager. 8 months. Obviously, in this case, I think it was 8 days before the departure was announced and the successor was confirmed. So obviously a very different kind of process than the last time Vancouver changed city managers. Although it's actually more similar to the previous 2 times before that, in 2015, 2008, when Vancouver, the mayor's office decided to change the city manager and had a replacement immediately.
That was Penny Ballum back in the day.
Yeah, so Penny Ballum replaced Judy Rogers in 2008, and then in 2015, Ballum herself was fired and replaced immediately with her deputy, who was Sadhu Johnston.
Right, right. So I know it's early hours for you to sort through all of this, but early impressions, what do you think drew Ken Sim to Van Dyke?
I mean, to hear, hard to say for sure. And I mean,
Right.
Sim wasn't able to speak today, and gave some comments in a press release about his about why he thinks Van Dyke is a good fit for the city, and his ability to deliver practical results. Nothing super specific, but it did strike me that in my conversation with Delta Councillor Dylan Kruger, he described, yeah, as I was saying earlier, he described Van Dyke as a no-nonsense guy who can get things done. Kruger actually described him as kind of a disruptor, like someone who's not afraid to shake things up, but in a good way, not in a bad way. And to my mind, I think that sounds like something that would be appealing to Ken Sim. Sim, obviously, he comes from the private sector himself. He and he has often described himself as somebody who is willing to shake things up, break with the orthodoxy in order to get things done, make things more effective, make things more efficient. He has a big focus on efficiency. And I also understand that one of the things Van Dyke did in his time at Delta was reorganize the city's management structure to make it more efficient. They also tried to, they redid the official community plan in a matter of, I understand, only 6 months, which is a very fast timeline to get something like that done. So I would think those kinds of things might appeal to Sim, but I'm just speculating because
Sure.
Sim hasn't kind of given any specifics. But yeah.
He's also, I guess, by profession, he was a chartered accountant, which again would align with Sim.
That's also something that he and the mayor Mayor Sim would have in common. Yes.
Okay. So we'll learn more. We'll hear from others. Right now, you've only had time to talk to a couple of people from Delta. I mean, important people, but people who are clearly in Van Dyke's corner, singing his praises. We haven't heard from anybody who might identify his deficiencies, if he has any, and everybody does.
Not yet.
But a couple of things jumped out at me looking at what has happened in Delta under his stead. The official community plan for that city was completely redone in a matter of 6 months, which, as you know, is a huge undertaking. And I understand it was like decades where it hadn't been changed. So good or bad, that was done very quickly on the face of it.
Yes. Yeah. And as we say, I think, that kind of speed and efficiency is something that might appeal to Mayor Sim.
When you're looking at things like the Broadway plan and all these other things that do require still a lot of work and a lot of finessing, and other, I guess, neighborhood plans. Like, where is Vancouver in terms of its official community plan and for the entire city?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an ongoing process as well. And so that's a good question.
Great.
What will be sort of his involvement in that? I mean, obviously, another thing that Van Dyke is going to be dealing with is FIFA, right? The city of Vancouver is hosting a couple of matches for the FIFA World Cup, and that is, coming up next year. So it's coming up very quickly. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of logistical challenges to sort out with that.
Right. And then during his time in Penticton, I was reading something about, at least in one of his exit interviews with media up there, it might have been the Penticton Herald. He was asked about what he thought of as some of his key accomplishments, and the one thing he cited was the creation of some new position in the city, community policing type officers, as well as, I guess, a bolstering of the bylaw department. And he was claiming, at least, that there were 7,100 public calls that were diverted to this new body away from the RCMP to free up policing resources. And again, that sort of seems to be aligned with some of the things Ken Sim has talked about around community policing.
Yeah, I'd say for sure. I mean, obviously public safety and policing has been a big priority for Sim and ABC. And they have implemented some changes in Vancouver already that have been aimed at diverting certain kinds of calls away from police to other more appropriate resources, again, to try to free up limited police resources. So yeah, that does obviously sound like it's kind of aligned as well.
Okay. And if we want to follow the money, because everybody's interested in what people are paid these days, he's leaving a position in Delta. Some might be surprised that for a municipality population 110,000, that he was pulling in close to $400,000. And I understand you've discovered he's getting a little bit of a raise in Vancouver.
Yeah. So he was actually Van Dyke actually, I think he was paid 393,000 for the most recent fiscal year, for which records are available, which is actually a little bit more than Paul Mokry was making to manage the city of Vancouver with a population about 6 times the size, which was interesting to me. So now Van Dyke, the city has just confirmed this morning that Van Dyke will get an annual salary of 450,000 in Vancouver. So it's about, I think, a 16% raise over what the previous city manager was making. And but yeah, so he'll get a bit of a raise there.
Yeah. Well, and I know it's a big job, but that is
yeah.
a substantial amount of money. And we have to also recognize everything happening right now. We're just over a year away from the next municipal elections. So
Yes.
Ken Sim and ABC and everybody else will be on the ballot. Not a lot of time for a new city manager to find his footing and get the things done that Sam presumably wants to get done before the next election.
Oh yeah, and I mean, one of the city right now, the finance team is in the middle of trying to prepare next year's budget, right? So that budget is going to come to council for approval probably late this year. It's a very challenging financial environment for all municipalities, not just Vancouver. There's so much uncertainty, trade wars. Obviously, it's a challenging financial environment to do budgeting, and it makes it more challenging that Sim and ABC have directed staff to try to come up with budget scenarios that would include like property tax increases as low as 1 or 2%, which is a fraction of what the finance team had recommended would be needed to preserve existing service levels. So, so Van Dyke presumably will be, he won't be doing it himself directly. There's a whole finance team and a CFO, but that is going to be obviously a challenging process to oversee finding these efficiencies to try to get that property tax increase down to the level that council wants to see for this final budget before the next municipal elections.
Right. And he doesn't start, I think I saw, until a week after Labor Day, September.
Yep. Starts in September.
So hopefully you get a chance to catch up with him either between now and then or soon after, and we can learn a little bit more about his approach. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Harold. Thank you.